Good morning. Welcome to the garden here in Western Pennsylvania. This very well may be the last garden tour of the season. We'll probably be out here some, but I don't know if we're going to hit November in terms of having enough going on in the garden to do a tour. Let's see what we have going on. My daughter was just picking peppers last night, and so there's some very baby notopeños left on here. This year we planted a whole bunch of different kinds of peppers. One of the new ones that we tried is notopeños. We planted two, and that is one of my favorite peppers. So that's going to be one of those that I'll probably up to like 4 or 5 different kinds next year, because the flavor is just so good. And I really enjoy these. They're the flavor of a jalapeno without the spice, so they're just really nice to grab to throw in pretty much any dish that we've tried. We've enjoyed them in. We've got some lovely, these are sweet banana peppers yet to pick, and some hot Hungarian wax. It's another one that's fantastic to grow. They're really prolific, and the flavor's really nice. Although next year I have to make sure I clearly mark which is which and pay attention to that, because there's been times we've grabbed what we thought was sweet and was spicy, and vice versa. I'll do better next year. One type of pepper that I will always grow is a Pippin Golden Honey. This is a sweet pepper. These are mostly garden snacks for me at this point. I always grab a couple as I'm walking through the garden and eat them. It's almost like eating fruit. They start out purple and they ripen to an orange. Some of them kind of stay a little greener. They're really good, super sweet. I need to use them in more dishes, but I end up eating them. Next year I'm going to dedicate more space to them, and I'm also going to possibly pick up some tomato cages to provide a little bit more support for them, because they seem to get a little leggy, and then I have some branches breaking. So next year we're going to try to give them a little more support and see if we can get a little more production out of them. My husband always picks up on me about the number of mugs that get left in the garden. I'm getting better, but I did leave one last night. These are ones we'll probably always grow. They're Bueno mulatas. These are hot. They start purple like this, and then they ripen to either a red or an orange. Pretty spicy, but we really like the flavor. I have 2 planted, probably for the average person or average family that doesn't do a ton of spice. One's plenty. These are pumpkin spice jalapenos. I really like these just because it's fun to have the different colors. There's no variation in flavor between this and a jalapeno, but when you're putting together a dish that has these different colors, it is very fun. These are some fall onions. I had taken some of my onion seeds that I had left over and went ahead and started them in pots and then transplanted them out. So we're hoping to get kind of like a little bit earlier of a harvest going into the spring, early summer, kind of ahead of the onions we plant next spring. So I have 2 places, 2 or 3. We've got a little chunk of onions here, and then we have some onions in another space. Dad, is it time?
But it's not short sandals time, I can tell you that.
That is true. I'm in a sweatshirt and a vest.
Chickens.
The chickens are going to get their morning move. We're down to getting just an egg every few days now at this point. Everybody has molted or is molting except for 2 of our 7. You're coming this way?
Yep.
Okay. I'll back up. How did you ever move the chicken tractor before we had a German Shepherd to circle it while you were moving?
No, that's a great one. Looks like it.
Luke just came out in shorts and a t-shirt. I have leggings, boots, a sweatshirt, and a vest on right now. Provided I usually require more layers than him, but it's definitely not shorts and t-shirt weather right now. So that's our pepper patch right there, along with some here. There we've got multiple bowls inside that need attention today, and then we'll continue to harvest till the frost makes that no longer possible. I've got a little bit of a parsley patch there, which I'm kind of excited to see how that progresses as we go into cool weather. And this is actually the third time for this kale to regrow here. It had grown last year, it grew in the spring, I cut it back, and it's growing again. I go through stages with greens. Like sometimes I do really well of incorporating them in dishes, and then sometimes I don't do as well. Sometimes I'm better usually when it's like the only option. But if I've got tomatoes and peppers and onions and I'm harvesting those and getting those cleaned up and into a dish, a lot of times I don't take the time with the kale or those kinds of things. Working on that. But we harvested our sweet potatoes out of this bed. We already have some lettuce in here that's actually volunteered, that's coming along. I planted some more, and I also threw in, here's some that is really tiny, threw some radish seeds in here too. Even if it doesn't get going to the point that we can harvest, just to have something growing is good. And then as I start chopping things out, I'm gonna top dress with compost and then cover all those beautiful leaves that our maple tree's given us. Look at that. I love the fall. We've got some lovely Swiss chard growing here. And again, this is one of those things sometimes I do really well with using, sometimes not as much. One of my favorite things, I haven't done this in a while, is to saute onions and garlic, and then throw some of the Swiss chard in and just barely wilt it, and then put a little bit of balsamic on over it right at the end, and then have some fried eggs and boiled potatoes, and do like a layer of potatoes, a layer of that those cooked greens, and then the egg on top. And if there's any tomatoes left, chop those up as well and throw those on top. Might have to do that soon. Now this has never happened for me. This was actually the bed that we had our broccoli in at the beginning of the year. And usually the broccoli gets so beat up by pests that I cut it out. And this one didn't. So I left it go so that I would get the blossoms. And also I'm going to be harvesting seeds from this one. This one specifically I really liked because it didn't get as leggy as some of the others. But it's starting to produce some really pretty little heads of broccoli that I might be able to use. This broccoli got put in the ground back in March. Has anybody ever had broccoli be able to grow through the summer and then produce for you in the winter? Let me know in the comments. Okay. Here is our cattle panel trellis that's going to become the chicken high tunnel here probably in the next week or two. We grew our cave beans on this year. It's amazing to me how quickly beans are like, all right, it's time for me to finish, because this was just solid green, and then leaves just started dropping. So they're drying out. I'm gonna let these go as long as I can. I may try to come in and get the ones that are already starting to rattle. If you shake them, you can hear the beans rattle in there. So I might start picking those, because always, when you're getting close to frost, it's the night that you have 10 other things going on and you're out here with a headlamp trying to harvest. So I will try to get some of it inside. But like I said, this is going to become our winter digs for our chickens. We covered this with greenhouse plastic. We moved the chicken coop, that red chicken coop, up here. And block the wind, fill it with leaves so they have that as deep bedding, insulation from the cold ground. Also, they're constantly mixing their manure in with that bedding. It keeps them a healthier environment for them, and also makes amazing compost. This space is also for the chickens. We came in here and planted some cover crop. So there's like radishes and turnips and broccoli and lettuce in here. Also a ton of volunteer tomatoes. But right here in the corner, this is our compost that the chickens made last year, also kind of into summer, because when we go on vacation or we leave, we put the chickens in here. They dig through that again, turn it for us. I mount it back up and it heats back up. So that compost is going to top the garden beds this fall, and then chickens start working for us again. All of these greens, they're either going to eat or just scratch and knock over, and that becomes more compost for us. Here's one of our beds of cabbage. It's doing pretty well. I needed to have gotten it netted, and I didn't. So I did spray it with BT last week just to get some of the caterpillars off of it. Some of the plants look really good, and others are pretty beat up. Like this one right here doesn't have much damage, where this one here does. Sometimes, and I know this is hard to do, but sometimes I feel like I learn as much by not covering or not like over managing something and observing to see how it does, so I can kind of learn what works the best. Now, I don't know why this is, again, observation, but got our broccoli back here along this back bed, and I have not sprayed with BT. That is an organic method for controlling worms and things like that. And there's like virtually no damage on this, and there's no damage on any of the other ones either. So I don't know why that is, but again, like if I have that like big fear of like, oh, I've got to, protect this from the caterpillars, and I like net it, I don't know if the netting helped, or maybe it would have been fine anyway. So sometimes like it is interesting when you don't get around to the things that you think you're going to, just to see what happens naturally. Now this whole bed along the whole back of the garden was originally created because I planted potatoes along the back in hay bales. I actually used hay bales, spaced a little bit, put leaf mulch in between, and planted down in that. And then all of that broke down, and I just left it and continued to plant into it. I tried to plant other stuff this year, but there's so many little potatoes that kind of get left as I harvest, because that was 2020. So this is the 4th year that potatoes have grown in that, either by intention or volunteer. So the things I tried to plant in there didn't do well because the potatoes overtook it. But when I planted the broccoli in here, the broccoli is doing amazing. So kind of excited to see how that does. This is also a fall bed right here. The lettuce has done amazing. We've been eating a lot of salads, adding those to sandwiches and things like that. Now, provided it's not perfect, but when you grow real food, it isn't perfect. I was actually talking to some coworkers while we were eating lunch this week, and one of my coworkers had made pesto from some like a container garden that he had on his patio, and like when he was cleaning it, like a giant spider came from underneath one of the leaves. And I said, you know what? I would rather eat food that has bugs in it, because if the bugs can't survive in it, I don't think I want to eat it. Now, these monsters are my radishes. I definitely did not time this right. Look at the size of some of these. Planted with the idea of like I wanted to get them started before it got too cool and too little daylight to get them going. These have all bolted. So I'm starting to plant radishes in other places. I don't know if we have enough time for them to get going, but there's one way to find out, and that's to put it in the ground and see what happens. I just I have a big old pile of not really weeds, some cover crop. I just cut out and getting this space ready to plant garlic. We hope to get garlic in the ground this weekend. So I leave roots in the ground. When I can, I just nip the plant off at the top. Now, if I hadn't let the cover crop get too far and seed, I would have just cut the cover crop and dropped it and let it stay there. But I left it in too long and it has seed heads on it. So that's going to go into the compost for the chickens to eat the seeds. And hopefully we'll get the compost heated to the point that that's not going to be a problem. But I don't think it will be. Now these are my sad little plants that sat in their pots too long, but they're starting to perk up. The color's kind of coming back to the center. Yeah, they're getting a little beaten up by bugs. And if you look at that guy right there, the center is some nice growth. So putting them in the ground might have given them a chance to produce a little for us. We've got some nice heads of cabbage in this bed here. Kind of same thing. Some of it's damaged, some of it's not. I put a couple over here in our old composter. And then our center bed still has a whole bunch of cherry tomatoes growing. There is some peas that I started in there. I don't know if they're going to get to the point of production. We'll see. All right, here is our new garden space. This is winding down. We still have some tomatoes coming out of this space. We harvested a little bit last night. We have a lot of green tomatoes in here yet. So this I'm going to leave in, like the plants that still have at least a little life to them. We're going to leave these in, let as much ripen as we're able to before the frost gets us. This has had some great production this year. We're now working, let me show you this one up here. So this up here is like a little bit later shot of tomatoes I put in. They're not quite as far gone as the lower ones, and there's a lot of nice fruit on there. So the center of this one right here, we had our winter squash. So that's been done for a while. I cut that out a while ago. We've been working the chickens through in the A-frame just to eat any bug larvae, weed seeds, turn it, add some manure, that kind of thing. We keep them in there when the weather's mild. If it's rainy or really cold, we put them back with the rest because that has better cover in our tractor. One of the things I do with winter squash, or squash in general, is I plant radishes around it so that they leave them to produce blossoms, and those blossoms are supposed to bring in your beneficials and then help manage the pests that bother your squash. When you do that, you end up with a lot of radish seeds. These are all radishes. If you look throughout the garden here, like any place you see kind of that little bit broader of a leaf, almost everywhere is a whole bunch of volunteer radishes. So I'm going to kind of mulch between those and let them go, and we'll see. Maybe we can get like a nice harvest of radishes just from the volunteers as we move into fall and early winter. This is where we planted a chunk of potatoes, and I planted buckwheat in here. Now again, I did better with this last year. This year I've just enjoyed watching the pollinators so much that I've left them for too long. So if we look at these seed heads, these are way too developed. I need to come in here, just nip those off and take them out of the garden so I'm not just replanting a whole bunch of buckwheat in the garden beds. Now if you look down there, that's where the chickens have worked. And then like right here is a spot we haven't gotten them yet. This is the first year that I've been able to trellis this way. I call it the non-cattle panel, cattle panel. We had some of this wire, we had this conduit, and instead of buying a cattle panel, we just utilized that. And it has been so easy to trellis these. So I'm gonna be using this again. And what we're going to do as the tomatoes finish, we're going to take that trellis down and just move it up a bed, and then bring the chickens down this bed, and then compost it, put compost on top of it, and mulch it. All right. So there's the garden. We've had a lot more success this fall than last fall. Last fall, everything I planted was a complete flop. We lost all our cabbage, all of our broccoli. Not sure 100% what was the factor. I have a few theories, but it's hard to know exactly what was the thing that made it so it didn't work last year. They're doing well. Like, they're not perfect, but we're definitely further ahead than we were last year. This year I finally found 9-gauge wire, and I have it to be able to make some hoops to cover the with bug netting if I ever get to that, which at this point probably not going to happen, or to get frost fabric over the plants to protect them going into the fall. So I have high hopes for some broccoli and cabbage and lettuce and radishes and things going into the fall. And then kind of as things are finishing out, we'll cut those out. I do recommend just cut them off and leave the roots in the ground. Don't pull them out. Those roots are valuable organic material to leave in the ground and to keep your soil intact. There's just a concept in farming that my brain kind of started to question and shift on. There used to be that concept of the soil needs rest, but I'm starting to shift more towards the soil needs covered and the soil needs plants, because if you let nature do what it wishes and you leave bare soil, weeds grow, because the soil wants to be covered, the soil wants plants growing in it. So if you kind of make that shift, I think it helps your soil overall. It helps your garden health and that kind of thing. Now I've got a lot to learn and I'm working on that. But keeping plants growing in your soil, a variety of plants, helps your soil. Keeping organic material over your soil, your leaves, your grass, different things like that, improves your soil. So kind of think of that going into the fall. It is late. It's hard to get things growing right now, but can I get my ground covered? Can I protect the soil from the elements? That kind of thing. The more I've done that, the more success I feel like I've had as a gardener. Thanks for joining me in the garden today. We'll see you soon.